I don't know about you, but in my late 30s, my body started sending me some pretty clear messages that things needed a shift. My sleep was off, I felt inflamed and puffy, my anxiety was higher, I was irritable, and that was confusing because I dedicated my life to living a pretty disciplined and healthy life. It felt like my tried and true things that continued to work for me just were not working for me anymore. So I did what I always do. I treated things kind of like an experiment, and some things I did pretty intentionally and some things I did without really realizing I was making a shift. And now looking back, I can see 5 habits that I totally quit or cut back on significantly that have made a noticeable difference in how I feel every single day. And before I get into it, I'm Christy. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner and fellow perimenopausal woman. I'm on the earlier end of perimenopause, and I help women navigate perimenopause with nutrition and lifestyle strategies so they don't feel like they have to white knuckle their way through it, and they can actually feel a little bit more like themselves again or feel even vibrant in this life stage. At no point am I saying that you absolutely should quit these or anyone who does these is making a bad decision. In fact, I'd say I'm envious of some people who are still able to do them and it doesn't affect them. Perimenopause and health in general is so personal and so uniquely you. And I'm just simply sharing my experience in hopes that it resonates with someone. Because this phase just isn't about a transition of hormones, it's about a transition of your identity as well. These habits weren't just routines, they were a part of how I saw myself. When your body starts whispering or even shouting at you, now is the time to listen. These are 5 changes that I made tuning into the things that my body was telling me. Let's dig into it. And one of them is I quit doing cardio just to burn calories. I was what you might call a cardio junkie. I grew up in a running family, so running was a part of the culture. I was a marathon runner. I was a spin instructor. I would follow those 1,000-calorie workouts on YouTube. I did all of the hardcore workout programs. I loved nothing more than having a really hard cardio session that left me like a puddle on the floor. But again, in my late 30s, I started feeling more puffy and inflamed than ever. I would also get injured quite frequently of overuse injuries. So whether that be feeling like I was getting stress fractures in my feet or my ankles or my shins or getting knee injuries. And I was feeling kind of depressed because I was thinking, how in the world am I supposed to work out for the rest of my life when I'm getting injured so often in my 30s? And using tools like the Aura Ring, it started to really make me wonder if some of this exhaustion that I would feel and the trouble sleeping that I was feeling were because of the workouts that I was choosing to do. So I decided to experiment and I stopped doing cardio except for walking and lifting heavy weights for a month. I said I will give myself a month to see how I feel, and if I feel like I still need cardio, I will jump back into it, but I need to give it a fair amount of time. And I will tell you, I have never looked back. I was sleeping better. My clothes were fitting better. I wasn't as hungry all the time. I had more energy. I had less headaches. And now it's been 4.5-ish years later. I still am only lifting heavy and walking, and any extra cardio on top of that are only things that I truly love. So I love hiking with my husband. I love biking. I sometimes like to do cross-country skiing. And I honestly wish I could still run. I look at runners and I'm envious, but it just doesn't serve me. Every once in a while, I'll try to go for a short run around the neighborhood because the weather's perfect and I'm craving a run. And then I'll get 5 minutes into it and I'll remember why I stopped. My body just doesn't love it. I look at exercise with a totally different mentality than I did in the past. Instead of using it as punishment or a way to earn my food, I now look at it as a way to be able to train to live the rest of my life. I want to be able to be on the floor with my grandkids someday. I want to be able to go on hiking trips with my husband for decades to come. I want to be able to carry my groceries into my house. We have our whole entire lives to exercise, and I want to train my body to continue to be able to exercise and fully function to maintain my health so I can live a long, healthy life. Hey, if this has been helpful at all, I would so appreciate it if you would hit like, subscribe, or share this with a friend. It helps more women find this type of information during this very confusing life stage. Thank you. And the next one is I quit using alcohol as a coping tool. This one gets a little personal. I never thought I had a drinking problem, but it has always been ingrained in my life. I was raised in a family where drinking was very much a part of celebrations, a part of relaxation, and so it has been ingrained in me for a very long time that alcohol was always tied to those things. And I would say I was never a really heavy drinker, but I started noticing in my mid-30s that alcohol was really starting to take a toll on my sleep. Maybe I would fall asleep really quickly, but then I would wake up with a racing heart at 2 o'clock in the morning and I wouldn't be able to fall asleep again. And then I would have a poor quality sleep for the rest of the night. I would wake up really tired. So not even hungover. We're talking like a glass of wine. I'd wake up tired and then my cravings would be off and how I wanted to eat would be off. And it just created this cascade. So I slowly started pulling back. Started off with not really drinking at all in the middle of the week. Then not drinking at home or only having wine or cocktails when I was out of the house. And then it became only more for special occasions. And it wasn't that I was intentionally doing these things. I just didn't want it anymore because I realized how much it was affecting how I wanted to feel. I heard a quote that goes something along the lines of drinking is borrowing from your tomorrow. And that really stuck with me because it felt like I was always playing catch up, whether that be for sleep or how I was eating or just how I was feeling in general. And that's just not what I wanted. And similar to other things of making food decisions because certain foods made me feel better than others, alcohol was the same. It just was not serving me anymore. And I slowly started cutting back. And another piece of this that made it a little bit more complicated and challenging, and it feels very vulnerable and personal to share this, but alcohol was a big part of my husband and my relationship. We loved having a margarita on Friday nights at the end of the week. We loved doing wine tastings together. We loved sharing a bottle of red wine. There was a lot of these things that we had always had together for the first 15 years of our relationship. So making some of these changes was hard for us. We would joke at times that we're like, well, what do we do? What do we do? So it has been an experience for both of us. Neither of us have quit drinking altogether by any means, but I rarely drink now. I love a good mocktail menu. I love having sparkling water with like a splash of juice. There's a lot of different ways that make me feel like I'm having a little bit more of an elevated special experience that fills the gap that alcohol had for me. The next one was I quit scrolling Instagram. I'm sure I am not alone in getting stuck in the time suck that is social media, but Instagram was not only very much a part of my personal life and keeping up with friends and news and hobbies or things that I was interested in, but it also was a part of my job. It was the #1 source of clients for years. And I think that added on a whole other complexity to how it became such a challenging thing to have in my life. Not only did I need to feel like I needed to keep up with things from like what's trending and what are the things that I need to do from that standpoint and what are people in my industry saying, what are people in my industry doing, but also from that personal standpoint of seeing acquaintances from college go to Greece with their family. I don't need to stay up to date on those things. And I was being inundated all the time with all of these messages that simply were not making me feel good and were changing how I was showing up not only professionally, but also in my personal life with my family. Even if I knew something was curated, I knew that that's not what someone's home looked like all the time, or I knew that's not what someone's relationship looked like all the time, it still made me feel a certain kind of a way and made me compare my life against theirs, and that is not healthy. And also, we know social media incentivizes people to be bold, to be polarizing, to be rage-inducing, and that is also not something that is healthy for me at this point in my life. And I tried all the tricks to set the right boundaries and figure out the right way to make sure that I wasn't spending too much time on it, but even if I went on to check something or I had posted and I needed to go on and comment or write messages back to people, I would find that even if I gave myself 5 minutes or 10 minutes to do it, it would then create a bad energy for me. And that adds up over time and was affecting me in many, many ways. So I quit it cold turkey about a year ago. I actually buried it deep in my phone, which was one of the other strategies that I tried to get myself to limit the amount of time that I was spending on it. And I told myself I could not go on it. I didn't delete it from my phone because I felt like I still needed to have access to it from a work perspective. I know it doesn't make sense, but it just felt right for me. And I didn't go on it anymore. And I'll tell you what, the first couple days were pretty brutal, but then it was amazing. I have better preservation of my energy. I have more time to be able to do things that I actually care about. I buy less, which I'll get into. I get my news when I want it instead of just things thrown in my face all the time, even when I wasn't really welcoming that type of content. And I'm not having FOMO all the time. I'm also getting better quality sleep because I'm not mindlessly scrolling before bed. Even though I felt like I had pretty good boundaries, sometimes I would still end up looking at something, again, just a quick look, and then it ended up being 10 to 15 minutes on my phone. The downsides of not being on Instagram is it does make it more difficult to keep in touch with everyone. I have to be a lot more intentional about keeping up with people who I care about in my life or businesses that I care about, and that does present some challenges sometimes, but it is so worth it. And the people who love me and care about me also will check in, and it creates more in-depth conversation rather than just all of this random information about people that I don't need to know and that is not relevant or helpful for my life. Which leads to the next one. This one is not quite as directly health focused, although I would say that it does help me mentally, and that is that I quit fast fashion, or in other words, buying for quantity rather than quality. And I've always been this way. I'm not saying I've always just bought things that were on sale for this, buying them on sale, but I am such a sucker for a hoodie or leggings that lift my butt like no other, or a cute sweater for the season. I was influenced by all of the cheap, cute fashion that I would see on Instagram, and I would buy them, and then I would realize that the quality was terrible. It would pill or it would rip, and I would need to end up recycling it, or it would be something that I just didn't like 6 months down the road when it changed into a different season. I didn't want to wear it anymore. And that is so wasteful. So not only did it create so much clutter in my closet, but I was spending way more money, and it made me really angry to have clothes that just were not standing the test of time. And I don't want this to come off as snooty or I'm only buying luxury items, and that's really not the case. In fact, I've actually increased the amount of secondhand clothes that I've been buying using sites like Mercari or Poshmark, because I'm realizing how much waste there is in the world and how many perfectly wonderful, high quality clothes that are barely worn that are out there. And when I'm wearing clothes that I feel good in and that are higher quality, it makes a difference in how I show up and how I feel. I also like renting clothes. If I have an event where I need a nice dress or something, I can rent a dress for a fraction of the cost of buying one. Plus, then I don't need to have it in my closet. I don't need single occasion clothes anymore. I can be able to rent high quality, beautiful clothes that make me feel really good for whatever that event is, and then I can send it back, and I don't need to keep it in my closet. And yes, it can feel like it's more expensive because you're spending X amount of dollars to rent an item once, but I'm able to wear something that is higher quality, that isn't contributing to the waste, and that I probably would have worn once anyway. So not only has this cut down on my spending a lot, but I'm not wasting as much. My closet is filled with items that actually bring me some joy. And the next one is I quit having cheat days. The nutrition I learned in my 20s celebrated cheat days as a way to actually fuel your metabolic fire. So it was all about restricting during the week and then picking a day to be able to eat whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted. And I stuck with that for way too long. I would be so disciplined and strict throughout the week, would not even have a bite of food that went off of a plan. And then the weekends came and I went nuts. And not only did it make my gut feel terrible the day of, but the effects lasted days and days beyond. And so it was a cycle that I kept going through of this restrict, 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 binge, feel terrible, restrict, 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 binge, feel terrible. I cannot believe I wasted so many years eating that way. And I would have a day where if I had anything that was off my plan, I would almost just think the rest of the day was a wash, and I would be far more lax on every other thing that I was eating. It was filled with so much guilt and shame and gut issues. I was not feeling good. Now, I have a better relationship with food than I have my entire life. And that's why I love tracking. Tracking has been really helpful for me because I can see how things that are maybe less nutritious still can fit into my day and fit into a very balanced way of eating. And so now, instead of feeling that when I have something that is a little less nutritious, that just opens the floodgates and I continue to indulge the rest of the day, I realize that doesn't make me feel very good. Instead, I look at what's my next meal gonna be so I can feel better starting at that next meal. And because I'm not as restrictive at all, it makes me feel less likely to want to binge on those more indulgent foods because I don't restrict them and I see how they can fit within a balanced way of eating. It creates so much less food stress when I travel or when I have a weekend when people are visiting and we're wanting to eat a little bit more indulgent foods. I just do not stress about food as much as I used to in the past. So again, some of these are probably not really earth-shattering. These may be things you may have quit years ago, or these may be things you still do when you feel good, or you might think that some of these are frivolous and stupid, and that is okay. You are entitled to your own opinion. I just wanted to share my experience in hopes that it resonates with someone to take a deeper look at their life and see the things that maybe aren't serving them anymore. And lead with curiosity, doing a little test of cutting back or removing it for a certain period of time and seeing how you feel. Did any of these resonate with you? Or have you quit something that you've realized just isn't serving you anymore? I'd love to hear your experience and it might help spark some ideas for others. And as always, let me know if there's any questions on the things that I talked about today. I'm a pretty open book, so I'm happy to share any other details if it would be helpful. And if you enjoyed this video, you might like this next one where I talk about 10 micro habits that have made a really big difference in my life. All right, you got this, and I'm here with you every step of the way. See you in the next one.